What does your crazy neighbor do to be labeled the crazy neighbor? She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard, 15 feet away. I felt this. My crazy neighbor took my new blueberry and raspberry bushes and stuck them in her yard. She replaced them with sticks she found. This makes me irrationally angry. I would turn into the crazy neighbor if anyone ever touched my plants. I had a neighbor who would sneak into my yard at night and roll up my sod. It would be laid perfectly the night before, but I'd get up in the morning and it would be rolled up just like it was when it came from the store. I finally got pissed and spent the night laying by my back door with a baseball bat and a flashlight, ready to bonk the crap out of whoever it was. Sure enough, they came around 2 in the morning, and I stood up, turned the light on, and was face to face with 4 raccoons rolling up my sod, looking for bugs. Well, did you bonk them? Had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone, including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he would drag a bunch of plastic bags full of God knows what to the end of his driveway so no one could turn around it. One time I came home and he was outside hosing it down in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway. Used to live in a little town of 300 people where we had an elderly neighbor named Gladys. She would routinely look near our garbage can outside and take the recyclable bottles and cans we would leave for her. After we cleaned out a fish tank, we put the gravel and fake plants in a bag and left it on top of the garbage can because it was already full. About a week later, Gladys hollered at me while I was outside to come over as she wanted to show me something. She had taken that bag we had left and planted the fake plants along the side of her house. She said she wasn't real confident that they would make it, but so far, they seemed to be thriving. I could only nod and compliment her on her green thumb. Better than me, who just did the opposite. Moved my daughter out of college and stuffed her plastic succulents into a box. Weeks later, she asked where the plants were so she could water them. But they actually survived. Tough little things. My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants, and meows at people who pass by. He is not dangerous at all, but he is not right in the head either. His caretakers are his parents, and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me he just likes to be a cat and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. I would also like to be a cat, so I see no issue with this. It's all fun and games until he poops in the sandbox. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, though she slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. Years ago, we had a guy in our neighborhood like this. He stopped hitting our house when my crazy-ass mother came flying out the house around 3 a.m. with her baseball bat. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he has been doing it for years when he introduced himself after we bought the house. He also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag as a housewarming gift, but wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard, and he is a really great neighbor. Just an older, quiet guy who keeps to himself and eats my flowers. Comes over to my yard and eats the lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads to boil and make jam. I thought that his particular foraging was interesting and quirky, so I planted a couple raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago when we first moved in, on the side yard we share. I told him to help himself to berries any time, especially before the birds do. The bushes have all gone insane, and the entire side of my house is now a summer berry haven for us to share. Having a decent relationship with the guy I share a property line with is worth some dead-headed flowers. Your neighbor might be part goat. You are a good neighbor, and a smart person who knows the difference between mostly harmless eccentricity and outright madness. If I owned a home, I don't, and knew I was slightly mad, I don't think I am. I'd want someone like you as a neighbor. We had one a while back that had a meth lab in the home. Crazy fights, yelling at all hours of the night. Dude would wander around the hood tweaked out crazy, and once he threw a Molotov cocktail out of the second floor window at another dude who was smashing up his car, screaming, "I'll fucking kill you, motherfucker." Those were interesting times. Pulled us over, pretending to be a police officer, saying that we had somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway, and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop, lol. Edit. I considered using my dash cam video to actually call it in, but we had just moved in and I wasn't sure if she was the type of crazy to burn the house down or poison my dog. After chatting with the other neighbors, it turns out she's just the wannabe HOA president in a neighborhood with no HOA. So, mostly harmless, just very annoying. Pretty sure that's a crime. He was hopping my fence during the day when I was gone at work to use my backyard pool. When confronted, thanks to a snitch neighbor, He claimed he had an agreement with the previous tenant that he could use the pool whenever he wanted. Guess what? I'm not that tenant. I have a bunch of security cameras now. Well, I used to have a neighbor who was legitimately mentally ill, although I don't know his actual diagnosis. His truck wouldn't start one day, dead battery, and he told everyone on the street that another neighbor was stealing the electricity. He knew this because of the way this guy parked his vehicle. Obviously, it was sucking electricity from the ground for his battery, which drained the car batteries near him. Many times, he would run down the street and warn everyone to hide their valuables because Japan was invading the country. He wasn't on drugs, but he did take medication for his mental illness, and everyone on our street could tell when he stopped taking it. Whenever he would start saying completely irrational things, we would remind him to take his medication, and he would thank us and go home, presumably to take it. He lived alone, and he was getting older, so I think he had a hard time remembering to take it. There were many, many more incidents. Edited to add, thanks for the rewards. I've never gotten any before this post. I'm glad the neighbors at least cared enough to remind him to take it. I used to live in a HOA. One of the members on the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns just to annoy the guy. At my last place, I had a neighbor that would re-mow my lawn if my lines weren't straight enough or if I missed a spot. Never found out who it was, but that was an incredibly fun summer. Only happened that year too. Took my parents to court because he lost in our HOA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. Edit. He actually demanded we pay his legal fees after he lost in court, twice. Next door lady standing on her driveway yelling at me because acorns have fallen from a large oak tree on my property onto said driveway, demanding that I cause the tree to cease and desist from this intentional criminal activity. I was dog sitting, probably about 16 years old. My neighbor charged into the house while I was there, with a gun pointing it at my head and while on the phone with the owners of the dog claiming, "There's an intruder. Real life ain't Call of Duty. I remember you, Daniel. Fuck you. Seriously." My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons, too much noise, etc. Nope, because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt them. My sister lives in the UK. Years ago, in rural Arizona, we shared a pond with the crazy neighbor. More sad than anything, he was in his 40s and lived with his mother around 1988. A Vietnam veteran, he would walk out to our shared pond with a .45 and a box of 50 rounds. He would then absolutely unload on the pond while yelling, "Police his brass," and walk quietly home. This happened every 90 days for about 3 years. In all likelihood, he was fighting a swamp monster that emerged every 90 days. This woman lived next to us who needed to have the police called on her at least once a week. She would scream at her roommate at all hours of the night, go into a drunken and sometimes drug-filled stupor, and scream at us while tripping out as we sat in our backyard. More than once I had to kick her out of our home because she walked in unannounced, beer in hand and drunk as ever. One time I called the police because she was screaming about killing someone and rolling around on her front lawn. Another time I received a call at work, 1 in the morning as I worked third shift. My girlfriend informed me they had to evacuate the house because the neighbor's garage was on fire. Turned out either she or her roommate had done it while doing drugs or smoking in the garage. She ended up moving away but would still walk to our house to ask for our lawnmower. She was not happy when I told her to get off my porch. I cared for an elderly woman for many years. She lived to the age of 93 in a crime-ridden inner-city neighborhood by being as tough and nasty as any criminal living nearby. Her oddest actions involved her incorrect belief that she owned the road in front of her house. She didn't even own a car, but she insisted that nobody parked there. She would confront them if they parked in front of her house. If they did it again, she slashed their tires in the middle of the night. Over and over for years. She was never caught, but everybody knew it was her. She only stopped when she lost the physical strength to slash a tire in her mid-80s. Then she started using spray paint on the cars. "He doesn't park in front of my house no more," was all the justification she needed to damage her neighbor's cars. This older lady lives across the street from me, and she is obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn, to the point that she will come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass in the fall or any other time. She spends hours a day outside with the leaf blower in full. She will go and knock on other neighbors' doors if she thinks you have too many leaves on your grass. She'll come over into your yard and do it herself if you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty large 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody has used that pool in at least 5 years yet. She opens it up every summer. Somehow, she likes my family and has never once yelled at us about our leaves and randomly brings things over like half-eaten gallons of ice cream and asks if we want it because she's not using it. Y'all might be willed that house when she leaves this world. The old lady who lived below me left me multiple cryptic letters blaming me for the birds chirping too loudly in the mornings. Not pet birds, the sparrows and shit outside. This went on for months. Edit, I'm flattered by the upvotes and awards. Thank you to answer the most commonly asked question. Yes, for a brief period, I had a bird feeder. I took it down after a few months after multiple cryptic letters. Eventually, management got involved and took her side even though bird feeders were explicitly allowed per the lease. There were several trees nearby, including one that literally hung onto both her and my balconies. I assure you that birds existed before I set up the feeder, as they continued to exist after. My sister and Bill took over the lease 4 years ago, and they still get the occasional note from Bird Lady. Apartment management has even inspected their unit to verify there's no bird feeder or any other bird luring devices. Edit 2. I found one of the notes. Again, your bird dodo is on my railings, bird seeds on my porch and chairs, and your birds are ruining my night rest, wee hours of the morning, birds in your feeder chirping. Bird feeder was gone at this point. I used to work nights at a hotel, and those were always my favorite calls to get. Yes, hello? The crickets outside are really loud and we can't sleep. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'll just go have a word with them and see what we can do. This happened disturbingly often. I'm still not sure what they actually expected me to do about this at 1 a.m. And you are sure that you aren't a Disney princess. When I first moved in, my neighbor walked into the house unannounced. When my wife gets home, sometimes she wants to stay in her car having a phone conversation. He will come out and walk down the side of his house, checking his sprinkler controls, and looks at my wife. He has 2 huge bushes he refuses to cut. It blocks our view of backing out of our driveway. The fire department came by to clear trees and bushes around the fire hydrants. The neighbor came out and yelled at the fireman, "This bush is older than you." Needless to say, I hope there are no house fires. Am I the only one who thinks he has a body buried there? She stalks us. Like every time I get home, she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 minutes later getting home this time or that I'm home 2 minutes earlier and then ask me why. One time, my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window with her hands and face pressed up on the glass, trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified they called me telling me to hurry up because a crazy lady was staring at them through a window. I replied, "Oh, it's just the stalker neighbor." Yeah, that was a funny day. We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage uninvited and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the fucking audacity of some people. Along those same lines, my parents moved back down to the family farm after they retired. Neighbor shows up to inform them of the arrangement, whereby everyone has agreed to allow the neighbors to ride horses, ATVs, etc. on each other's land. Except, my parents had the land, 100 acres, while the neighbors had residential-sized lots. Also, my parents were never part of these arrangement discussions, so the audacity, indeed. My sister-in-law got this same neighbor when she moved in. The guy's exterior is immaculate, and he immediately started suggesting plants to remove / trees to cut down. They have a beat-up panel in the stockade fence separating their backyards, and he's been harassing them about it since day one. We have an asshole neighbor who demanded we cut down our trees after he moved in. The property has been in my family for 70 years. The trees are at least 120 years old, probably more. We cut down a couple, regrettably, but he rakes up any needles and leaves on his lawn and dumps them in ours. Don't like the fucking trees? Don't fucking move in next to them. Not sure if this counts as crazy, but I have this neighbor who is part of a spiritual organization called Brahma Kumaris. Every time someone in the neighborhood is going through rough times, especially deaths in the family, she goes to their house and instead of offering condolences, she preaches how they should join this organization and things will be better. She doesn't acknowledge anyone the rest of the time except the time when someone dies or a new family moves in the neighborhood to whom she preaches and gives books written by leaders of the organization. Yikes, it sounds like a cult. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months, I realized that she was no longer parking her car in her garage like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she'd grab two 2x4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with it, she didn't have an answer. Edit, bonus crazy neighbor stories. I drove 16 hours straight, pulled into my driveway, and crashed on my couch immediately. Must have left the garage door open because I woke up to the neighbor lady shaking me to see if they missed my newspaper delivery that morning as well. Neighbor lady thought I didn't clean up after my dog in her front yard. I had never owned a dog, so she retaliated by walking around the neighborhood with a garbage bag, picking up every bit of dog poo she could find, and dumped said bag of dog poo on my front lawn while I was standing in the front window watching. Ran up over $300 on 1 month's water bill of mine because neighbor lady was hooking her sprinkler up to my water when I'd leave for work in the morning and would let it run all day until right before I got home from work. She would put up an ugly orange snow fence between our yards in the fall to keep my leaves out of her yard. Me pointing out that I only had pine trees did not dissuade her from the decision to leave the snow fence up. Edit number 2. Day 1. I should have known something was fishy with this lady. Literally, day 1. I closed on my house at 9 a.m. and had a roofing company at the house waiting for the coal that I closed. We spent the day ripping off the old layers and getting bundles up on the roof for the next day. It was hot out, we were exhausted and all sitting in the front yard cooling off when neighbor lady walked out of her house, down the sidewalk to my house, and without even acknowledging the 6 of us staring at her, she walked in the front door and had herself a look. She hated dandelions. I found this out the first year that I lived there when I noticed that my lawn was dying off in an extremely weird way. Almost as if someone was spraying weed killer on the stream setting trying to snipe dandelions from 20 feet away. That's literally what she was doing. Being the nice guy I am, I would clean her driveway off in the winter because I had a snowblower. She would never thank me in person, but instead, she'd come over to my house after I had finished and would leave a bag on my front door that usually contained whatever expired goods she had in her pantry. Some of the standouts for me was like a dozen cans of 10-year expired Chef Boyardee, and once, a half a bag of wheat flour. She knew lumber prices were going to be crazy in 2021. On the one hand, crazy. On the other hand, spry enough at 85 years old to walk and carry lots and lots of boards. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to press like button and subscribe. I really appreciate you guys. If you want to suggest interesting Reddit posts, drop them down in the comments. Till next time, peace.